Thank you, Senator Ruston. Senator Ludlam.
Thanks, Madam Deputy President. The last fortnight we've seen a collection of the very worst that Australia can dredge up in climate politics. A record-breaking heatwave has put the blowtorch on the eastern two-thirds of the continent. Sydney recorded its hottest day in history. Last Saturday, the 15 hottest locations in the world were all in Australia. And at the same time, as parts of inland Australia were hotter than 50 degrees, severe floods were washing away parts of the Western Australian wheat belt. Now, on the assumption that you're listening to this speech from outside Parliament House, I can confirm that this building is air-conditioned. It's extremely comfortable in here. You can go whole days without knowing what the weather's doing outside because this place is so self-contained and cut off from the world. Now, add that cocoon effect to the built-in prejudice of the Conservative mindset to reject anything that can't be explained in a one-panel Bill Leak cartoon. And that's how you can have Liberals and Nationals in here attacking Australian renewable energy companies, even as people are evacuating burning townships in New South Wales or having their farms washed away in the southwest of WA. Now, I confess that I used to treat climate change denial as an annoyance or a psychological curiosity, but not something to take super seriously. So I've listened to Senator McDonald in here talking about how this morning was unusually chilly, or Senator Boswell before him proclaiming that he personally hadn't observed the sea level rising when he took his boat out. And I've seen the contempt that they've shown for CSIRO, the Bureau of Meteorology, NASA, NOAA and the world's National Academies of Science, and I've been wondering for years what it would take to get through to them. But so instead of bringing a bunch of ICE core data in with me tonight, we asked the advice of a school teacher, how they'd get through. And they told us this: what do you do if you're in bed and it's really cold? You put a doona on. How does that make you warmer? Because it traps a layer of warm air between the blankets and your body. Elegant, isn't it? Now, imagine that starting in about 1750, you begin pulling another doona on top. And imagine that that doona is stuffed with 2,000 billion tonnes of heat-trapping carbon dioxide and methane from burning coal, oil and gas, that when parts of the bed begin to smoulder and catch fire, it's not because of sunspots or socialism or the United Nations, it's because that extra doona is really starting to heat the place up. At one end of the denial spectrum, we have the total lost cause, someone like One Nation Senator Malcolm Roberts. Senator Roberts wouldn't recognise empirical evidence if it bit him on the face. It is empirically provable that the Arctic is warming at twice the rate of the rest of the planet and that the Greenland ice sheet is coming apart at the seams, but it doesn't matter. He is unpersuadable. He is unpersuadable because his whole political identity is based in that denial. He's like a man wearing a hideously tight blindfold, walking out onto a busy freeway, demanding to be shown empirical evidence of the traffic that's speeding towards him. Now, sometime soon, the painful reality is going to hit the people following him out onto the road. But at least you know where he stands. He's desperately wrong about the situation that we're plunging into, but at least he's consistently wrong. Now, a little further along the denial spectrum, you run across characters like former Prime Minister Tony Abbott or Premier Colin Barnett or former Labor Minister Martin Ferguson. In my view, these people are a lot more dangerous than weird outliers like Senator Roberts, because they have a much bigger platform and they use it to say one thing while doing exactly the opposite. They assure us that they care and that they have a plan to do something about climate change, but because a lot of them are in hock up to their armpits to coal and gas corporations, their actions and their voting record are in violent contradiction to their words. So step up, Queensland Labor Party. They campaigned to save the Barrier Reef when they were in opposition, and 5 minutes after winning government, they started writing cheques with other people's money to help a corrupt Indian multinational to gouge out the world's largest coal mine. Now, guess who else sits in this category of unforgivable hypocrites? Here's a quote. See if you can guess who this is. "It provides the most comprehensive technical blueprint yet for what our engineers, our scientists can begin to do for us tomorrow. A zero-emissions future is absolutely essential if we are to leave a safe planet to our children and the generations that come after them." Raise your hand if you guessed that that was Mr Malcolm Turnbull at the Sydney Town Hall in 2010, helping to launch the Beyond Zero Emissions 100% National Renewable Energy Plan. Now, I know he said that because I was up on stage with him, and I vividly remember feeling a brief flash of hope because here was an articulate contender for the Prime Ministership endorsing a plan for a rapid rollout of utility-scale solar thermal plants and 7-megawatt wind turbines. Prime Minister, what happened? You've ended up politically grafted to embarrassing throwbacks like Mr Barnaby Joyce and Senator Ian MacDonald, and you're reduced to shuffling around pathetically in the background while your idiot colleagues pass a lump of coal around the House of Representatives. Our objective must be to make it politically impossible for people like this to ever hold high office again. The atmosphere does not care what delusions they've wrapped this criminally irresponsible conduct in. The West Antarctic ice sheet doesn't care about their feelings. The tinder-dry forests, the dying reef, they don't take their cues from smug push poles from the Minerals Council. In a couple of weeks' time, the pointless, exhausted waste of space that we know as the Barnett government will finally go to the polls in Western Australia. As his final act of desperation, Premier Colin Barnett has cut a preference deal with Pauline Hanson's One Nation. That comprehensively rats out the National Party. It raises the serious prospect that Miss Hanson and the all single mothers are lazy and have ugly children guy will hold balance of power in the state upper house. Now, the Liberal Party have been lining up all week to endorse Miss Hanson as a more sophisticated and compliant individual, Senator Hanson, I should say, and compliant individual than the version who self-destructed in the early 2000s. So wait until they hear about their candidate for Bateman, who was running on a platform of rescuing Christians from a covert Nazi-inspired gay mind control program. I kid you not. Now, although I'm delighted to be the first person to get that phrase into Hansard, I'm horrified that this is the party that Premier Barnett thinks can refloat his sinking ship. Now, we have a different view. We think that on March 11, the Barnett government should be broken up and sold off to whoever will have them. One Nation can get in the sea. We need something very different in their place. So here's the plan. In December 2015, our National Energy spokesperson, the member for Melbourne, Adam Bant, launched Renew Australia with Senators Di Natale and Waters. This is what we mean by something different. It establishes a new authority responsible for leveraging $5 billion into planning, construction and operating new energy generation over the next 4 years. It describes a plan to support workers as we transition away from fossil fuels through a $100 million fund for training, reskilling and to assist new industries move into affected areas. And it sets out a staged and orderly closure plan for new coal-fired and then gas-fired power stations guided behind emissions intensity and pollution standards. Renew Australia is not a slogan, it's a roadmap that we can start putting into action as we build a critical mass of support. It sets us up with a national platform for developing more detailed transition pathways for individual states. So, unlike South Australia, WA isn't connected to the national electricity market. About half the state's electricity demand is served by a single grid that runs the southwest corner of WA from Geraldton to just east of Albany. Now, unlike the East Coast, half this electricity is generated by gas-fired power stations, fuelled by gas pumped nearly 1,600 kilometres from the Burrup Peninsula in the northwest. Dwindling coal supplies from Collie make up most of the rest, and a slender 8% is served with renewable energy, mostly wind power, topped up by a rapidly expanding rooftop solar industry. Now, for 8 years, we have watched with mounting horror as Premier Barnett sacked nearly everyone in the state public service with any clean energy or climate expertise, hurling money at the heavily profitable mining sector instead. He's been the champion of uranium mining, fracking, gas industry vandalism on the Burrup Peninsula and James Price Point in the Kimberley. He blew $300 million refitting an obsolete coal-fired power station that we then didn't need. He promised an electric light rail transit system for Perth before the last state election and then changed his mind straight afterwards and went on a freeway building bender instead. So faced with the government's determination to obstruct the clean energy transition, we undertook to write the plan ourselves. We published the first iteration in 2013, we updated the plan in 2014, and we launched the culmination of this work, Energy 2030, earlier this month. How much renewable energy does the Southwest need to get to 100%? How much will it cost? Will it be reliable even at night or when there's no wind? Where would we build it? How many jobs does it create? How long does it take? These are the questions that we set out to answer with the help of a group of independent Western Australian energy experts known as Sustainable Energy Now. They were able to plot two different scenarios for a 100% clean energy build, one that relies more heavily on solar thermal plants, costs a little bit more but results in lower carbon emissions at the end of the build. And the other is a more diverse, lower cost setup that uses more distributed energy. Now, in both scenarios, by the year 2030, there are 700,000 homes and businesses with solar battery storage. And it massively increases the network's resilience to shocks, and it cuts power bills dramatically. What does it look like in the year 2030 if we get this right? 12 new concentrated solar thermal stations, about 100 megawatts each. Senator Milne and myself, or I should say, visited one of these, a smaller scale version of one of these plants in Spain in 2012. I undertook to visit a 110 megawatt plant in Nevada a couple of years ago, and the company Solar Reserve that built that plant is active here in Australia. They can't get a project to market, they can't get a power purchase agreement because the Australian government, state and federal, are facing the wrong way. So 12 plants of that scale, 6 large-scale solar photovoltaic farms, 29 large-scale wind farms and 4 biomass plants. We are not interested in native forest logging or so-called native forest waste. What we are interested in the southwest of WA is oil mallee biocropping for power stations. Now, this is a total of 51 power stations, but 17 of them already exist. We are part way into the build. The plan creates 12,000 jobs a year in technical trades, engineering and white-collar occupations, and the best part is it costs the same as not doing it. When you add the savings from energy efficiency, and by the fact that by the time 2030 comes around, we no longer have an annual coal or gas bill. We've kicked the fossil habit. Colleagues, this is doable, but it's not inevitable. It's going to take political courage, determination and a change of government in 3 weeks' time in WA. A week ago, I launched the Energy 2030 plan with our East Metropolitan spokesperson, Tim Clifford, and he said, "I have been door-knocking for weeks, taking our policy directly to people's doorsteps, and there has been overwhelming support in the community. I never thought a person with my background would ever be in a position where I'd be launching a historic initiative like our battery storage policy. So if you know somebody in WA, can you do us a giant favour and tag them in this video? Please share it. Personally, I can't think of a better favour that WA could do to the rest of the country than voting Colin Barnett and his One Nation partners into the bin on March 11. The most important thing for us to do is to prove to young people that we are determined not to abandon them to the kind of hothouse future that Premier Barnett, Ms Hanson, Mr Morrison and his pet lump of coal are setting up for them. And I hope some of these individuals live long enough that they can be around to get a glimpse of the future that they're setting up for those who are too young to vote, but I doubt it. The negligence of this generation will probably not be punished. It is long after these old men have died that the impact of their contempt for the generations coming through will be felt. I honestly believe that there is still time to prevent the very worst impacts of what we've set in motion, but there really is no more time to stuff around. We have proven that we don't have an engineering problem, we don't have a technical problem, we have a very substantial political problem. And on the 11th of March, a little more than 3 weeks from now, we can take a decisive step to solve a part of that problem. What I find most perverse is that the same people working hardest to prevent clean energy companies from getting a start in Australia are the same ones who are most horrified at the idea of giving safe harbour to refugees. It is about the most brutal failure to put 2 and 2 together imaginable. Here's one really obvious example. There are around 170 million people living in Bangladesh, so about 7 times the population of Australia. Most of these men and women, children, sisters, brothers, grandparents, grandchildren live on alluvial floodplains on the edge of the Indian Ocean. Conservatively, 10% of the land area will be inundated and lost if the sea level rises 1 metre, not in a slow and gradual manner, but given effect by violent storm surges and hurricanes. So how many people do we realistically think will be on the move by mid-century? Now, like many in here, I'm at risk of becoming numb to the statistics of suicides, murders, mental illness, sexual assaults and rapes on the island internment camps that are Australia's national shame. But it is essential that we don't turn away from the horrors being inflicted in our name, because the way that we treat desperate people forced to flee their homes will be the issue that defines whether the human family survives this century or not. Last week, the Australian government began forcibly deporting people from Manus Island. The UN Refugee Agency has said that no deportations should take place because there are obvious concerns about how people's refugee claims have been assessed. Asylum seekers on the island have provided dozens of examples of procedural mistakes, inconsistencies, perverse decisions, and of course legal avenues for these asylum seekers have not been exhausted, and many of them have not yet been subject to the possibility of judicial review. The detention centre in Manus Island was declared illegal 10 months ago. The PNG Supreme Court ruled last April that the indefinite detention of asylum seekers on Manus Island was unconstitutional. But nothing has been done to close it down. And today, the Liberal and Labor parties washed their collective hands of responsibility by refusing to support a Greens motion opposing these forced deportations. Now, I said I would avoid statistics, so let's learn a little more of one individual's story. Iran. The theocracy that the United States government inadvertently set in place when the CIA helped overthrow a democratically elected government in 1953, Iran, has long refused to accept any person who is repatriated involuntarily. And so this means that these individuals face the prospect of indefinite detentions or worse if they are forced to go back to Iran, having fled that place. One such person is the Iranian asylum seeker and cartoonist, known by his pen name Eaton Fish. Eaton Fish is 25 years old. His real name is Ali. He suffers severe mental illness. He has been on hunger strike for 16 days as of today. He is bleeding from his stomach. He is becoming more and more unwell. His ability to communicate and be lucid is deteriorating, and he is desperate. Eaton Fish has received a deportation notice, but he wants people to know that he's not on hunger strike for that reason. He is on hunger strike because he has been the victim of sexual assault, chronic sexual harassment and abuse in Australia's immigration prison camp, and he cannot bear the suffering anymore. He's petrified of being moved from his supported accommodation back into the general area. He's petrified of being returned to Iran and executed. His refugee determination status process was an obscene joke. During the determination, he was so unwell that he was unable to present his case. Now, all of this has been documented. It's taken Eaton Fish a year to talk about his experience, and now he wants people to know what is going on. The Australian government's been petitioned many times, both from within Australia and internationally, asking that Eaton Fish be brought to Australia for medical treatment. So Cartoonists' Right Network International is one such group, and they write the following. It is with profound alarm and sadness that we learn that our friend and colleague, cartoonist Mr. Eaton Fish, currently held in an Australian refugee rendition camp in PNG, has decided to undertake a hunger strike. He is a man who has given up hope. He cannot struggle any longer. He cannot face the future that is being forced upon him, and he would rather die than submit to the indignities of further inhuman treatment. Today, the Greens stand, once again, against this unacceptable treatment of asylum seekers by this government and by the ALP, who initiated the establishment of these camps in the first place. We urge you to transfer this critically ill young man to Australia or risk another death on our hands. I'd like to acknowledge Senator Nick McKim, our spokesperson on this issue, and the work done by Senator Hanson-Young over many years on this issue. The Greens will never give up while these camps remain open. I also take this opportunity to say that we will not forget the young men who have died in our care on these death camps. Reza Barati, 24, also from Iran, died from head injuries after he was beaten to death by security personnel who were paid by Australian taxpayers to protect him. Hamid Karzai, 24, also from Iran, died from medical neglect after a treatable foot infection. Faisal Ishaq Ahmed, 27, he was from Sudan. He fell ill and he died on Christmas Eve 2016 after seeking medical treatment 13 times in 2 months. On the death of Faisal, Manus Island detainee Abdul Aziz Adams said, "This system is designed to kill us one by one." Colleagues, this system shames us one by one. It is time that these camps are closed and that the people were brought here to Australia.
Thank you, Senator Ludlam. Senator Rhiannon.